Did she really just hear the surgeon say that? Marissa Clarke, 34, a petite woman with sharp cheekbones and chestnut hair tied in a loose bun, stared at Dr. Philip Harrow, disbelief freezing her in place. His voice had been calm, almost rehearsed. "Honestly, you might want to Google it," he said, as if answering a trivial question about a recipe instead of the unexplained pain that had haunted her for months. Her husband, Benjamin Clarke, 37, tall with close-cropped black hair and eyes that rarely betrayed emotion, clenched his jaw. Marissa could feel the tension radiating off him like electricity. He had spent hours sitting in waiting rooms, reviewing insurance papers, pacing hospital corridors, and listening to doctors politely dismiss his wife's complaints. But this casual shrug of negligence was something else entirely. Marissa's chest tightened. She had known something was wrong with her body for months. Sharp pains in her abdomen, intermittent fevers, moments of blurred vision that left her disoriented at her office desk. She had explained everything meticulously, keeping a journal of symptoms, tests, and oddities. But time and time again, doctors either suggested stress, fatigue, or a mild infection. Nothing seemed to satisfy their diagnostic confidence. "Google it?" she repeated, disbelief rising in her voice. "You mean, after all the tests, all the blood work, all the scans, I'm supposed to figure it out myself?" Dr. Harrow adjusted his glasses, glanced at his clipboard, and smiled thinly. "I mean, sometimes you get answers faster online. Patients often find things we might overlook." Marissa's fingers tightened around the edge of the examination table. The sterile smell of the office, bleach and antiseptic, made her stomach turn. She had trusted this man with her life, and now she felt betrayed in a way that was impossible to ignore. Benjamin took a deep breath. His usual calm had vanished, replaced with something Marissa had rarely seen. A controlled intensity, like a predator assessing a threat. "Maybe we should get a second opinion," he said evenly, but his tone carried the weight of warning. Dr. Harrow waved a dismissive hand. "Sure, if you like. But honestly, I've seen this enough times. You probably just need rest and hydration." Marissa felt her world tilt. How could someone trained to preserve life speak so flippantly about a patient clearly in distress? Her mind raced, heart pounding, trying to reconcile fear with disbelief. Something wasn't right. Later that evening, Marissa sat on the couch in their modern apartment overlooking downtown Chicago, the skyline painted in the fading orange of dusk. Benjamin placed a hand over hers. "We need to do more than a second opinion," he said. "I have contacts. People who understand that medicine isn't just charts and protocols. Sometimes it's instinct and investigation." Marissa looked at him, puzzled. "Contacts? What are you talking about?" Benjamin hesitated for just a fraction of a second before pulling a wallet from his jacket pocket. He opened it carefully and produced a small folded badge. The words Federal Investigative Service gleamed under the dim living room lamp. Marissa's breath caught. "You're what?" He gave a small, wry smile. "I'm not just your husband. Sometimes, I investigate when things don't add up. And this," he gestured toward her, "doesn't add up." Her mind spun. Was this a joke? Some elaborate prank she had missed? But the seriousness in his eyes, the tightness in his jaw, the way his hand hovered protectively over hers, it all screamed truth. The next morning, Benjamin drove her to a different hospital, one with a reputation for aggressive diagnostics. Marissa tried to calm herself, though the tension was palpable. She felt like a criminal being escorted into a secretive building, her body under scrutiny, her personal health becoming a puzzle others might not solve. Dr. Elaine Masters, 45, a stern but compassionate woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a severe bun, greeted them. Her sharp eyes scanned Marissa's medical history and her meticulously kept symptom journal. Unlike Dr. Harrow, she didn't dismiss the details. She nodded thoughtfully, thumbs tapping against the edge of her tablet. "This is unusual," Dr. Masters said quietly, leaning back in her chair. "Your symptoms aren't typical, but the pattern is concerning. I'd like to run a series of tests, more in-depth than what you've had so far. And we'll review everything again." Marissa felt a glimmer of hope, though it was mixed with apprehension. Could someone finally see what she had been trying to communicate for months? Could someone finally take her seriously? Meanwhile, Benjamin never left her side. He made calls discreetly, quietly checking on the lab schedules, quietly observing interactions, quietly ensuring no stone was left unturned. Marissa was beginning to understand the weight of his words last night. His investigation wasn't just a formality. It was a safety net woven from years of experience she had never fully grasped. As days passed, more tests were run. MRI scans, blood panels, endoscopic evaluations. Each result came back inconclusive, and frustration mounted. Marissa began to feel the creeping doubt in her mind, wondering if she was imagining the severity of her own condition. But Benjamin refused to yield. He tapped into networks she didn't know existed, contacting specialists, consulting private labs, and even asking quiet, pointed questions to hospital administrators. At night he returned home, his suit slightly rumpled, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "We're close," he whispered. "I can feel it." One afternoon, Dr. Masters called them into her office. Marissa sat rigidly, heart pounding. Benjamin's hand found hers under the desk. A silent tether. "We've found something," Dr. Masters began carefully. "It's rare, but the markers are consistent with an autoimmune reaction triggered by a previously undetected infection. It's not something that appears on standard tests. That's why it was missed before." Marissa felt her knees weaken. Relief surged, but it was tangled with fear. "So, I'm sick." "Yes," Dr. Masters said gently. "But now we can target it. There's a treatment plan, and if we act quickly, the prognosis is good." "You were very lucky your husband intervened." Marissa's mind reeled. She had spent months ignored, dismissed, told to Google her own condition. Yet here she was, finally validated, finally facing a path toward healing. She looked at Benjamin, whose usual stoicism had cracked just enough to reveal pride and relief. But then he leaned in, whispering with a trace of tension in his voice. "This is only the beginning. Whoever was supposed to protect you missed it. And that's not something we can ignore." Her stomach turned. Was he hinting at something bigger? Something systemic? Over the following weeks, treatment began. Marissa responded well, but the process was grueling. For medications, physical therapy, daily monitoring, each day brought a new challenge, a fresh scare. Yet through it all, Benjamin's presence was constant, unwavering. He was no longer just a husband. He was a shield, a protector, a silent sentinel ensuring that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. During one particularly tense evening, a lab technician accidentally spilled a sample, nearly contaminating a key test. Benjamin's sharp tone cut through the room. "Handle everything properly. There's no margin for error." The staff froze, aware they were dealing with someone who would not let negligence go unnoticed. Marissa realized then that her ordeal had layers beyond the physical. She had survived the disease, but the system's failures, the casual dismissals, the arrogance of those sworn to heal, those were the real enemies. And Benjamin, with his federal authority and investigative mind, had become her unexpected weapon against them. At night, Marissa lay in bed, reflecting on the journey. Her body was healing, slowly but surely. Yet the emotional toll lingered. Fear, frustration, betrayal. She had trusted the system and found it wanting. She had trusted herself and feared she was imagining her own suffering. And now, with Benjamin as both partner and protector, she was beginning to understand that vigilance and advocacy were as crucial as medicine itself. And just when she thought she could breathe, a knock came at the apartment door. Benjamin opened it to find a man in a sharp suit, briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Mr. Clarke?" he asked. Benjamin stiffened. "I'm listening," Benjamin replied, his tone calm but edged with authority. The man handed him a sealed envelope, then left without another word. Benjamin tore it open. Marissa caught a glimpse of the first line. "Your wife's case is not isolated. There are others. We need your assistance." Marissa's pulse quickened. What did this mean? How deep did the problem go? She looked at Benjamin, whose expression was unreadable, a storm behind his eyes. She swallowed hard. "What is it?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Benjamin folded the paper slowly. "It looks like we're only at the tip of the iceberg. This goes further than we thought." Marissa felt a chill. She had survived one battle, but the war, whatever it was just beginning. Her mind raced with questions. Who else had been ignored? How many more patients were at risk? And what exactly had she stumbled into by trusting the wrong doctor? The room felt smaller suddenly, charged with anticipation, fear, and an unspoken urgency. Marissa realized that survival had been only the first step. Now she had to confront a network of oversight, negligence, and hidden dangers she had never imagined. As the evening light faded, casting long shadows across the apartment, she turned to Benjamin. "What do we do now?" He looked at her, a faint, determined smile forming. "We find the truth, no matter what it takes." And with that, Marissa understood one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. If doctors dismiss your symptoms and the system fails, how far would you go to uncover the truth? Subscribe to White Coat Secrets and follow Marissa's journey as she unravels a shocking medical conspiracy that could affect anyone. How many more lives were quietly slipping through the cracks while the world looked the other way? Marissa Clarke lay in her hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling, her mind racing. The envelope Benjamin had received still burned in his hands. The words, "Your wife's case is not isolated. There are others. We need your assistance," lingered like a shadow across the room. She could feel the gravity of the situation settling around them, heavier than any illness. Benjamin sat beside her, his tall frame leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes scanning every corner of the room. His badge gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, a reminder of the authority and responsibility he carried. "We need to be careful," he whispered. "This isn't just about you. It's bigger than any one hospital." Marissa swallowed hard. Bigger? She had thought the battle was personal, her health, her trust betrayed. But now, the notion that multiple patients were suffering under the same veil of neglect made her stomach churn. Dr. Elaine Masters entered, clipboard in hand, her expression a mixture of concern and professional curiosity. "Marissa." "Benjamin. I've reviewed the additional files you sent. Some of these cases are troubling. Patterns emerge that shouldn't exist. Repeated misdiagnoses, overlooked symptoms. It's systematic." Marissa's pulse quickened. "Systematic? You mean, this isn't just my case?" "No," Dr. Masters said quietly. "There are at least a dozen similar situations in the past year where patients were dismissed until the situation became critical. And the troubling part," she hesitated, "in each case, some physicians were involved repeatedly, always managing to avoid serious repercussions." Benjamin's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with Marissa, the same combination of anger and determination that had fueled him before. This was no accident. It was negligence layered with protection, hiding in plain sight. Over the next several days, Benjamin's investigative instincts kicked into overdrive. While Marissa focused on her treatment and slow recovery, he accessed medical reports, traced hospital records, and cross-referenced patient files. Every revelation built the tension like a storm about to break. Patients whose names were barely whispers had endured repeated dismissals, some of them permanently disabled, others nearly dead. Marissa felt a mix of horror and resolve. Her own body was fragile, but her mind was sharpening, fueled by the knowledge that her survival wasn't just personal. It was a lifeline for others. One afternoon, Benjamin's phone rang sharply, breaking the hum of machines in the hospital room. He answered with a low, clipped tone, listening intently. Marissa watched him, noticing the rare flicker of unease in his otherwise controlled expression. "They've caught on," he said finally, voice taut. "Some of the administrators know we're digging deeper. They're moving records, limiting access." Marissa's heart pounded. "Moving records? What do you mean?" Benjamin glanced at her, grim. "They're trying to cover it up. Whoever is behind this doesn't want anyone finding the pattern. Not even Dr. Masters was expecting how deep it goes." That night, Marissa struggled with sleep. The 4-drip kept a slow, steady rhythm, but her thoughts were jagged. Every doctor who had dismissed her, every nurse who had shrugged, every administration that had hidden behind bureaucracy. None of it seemed accidental anymore. The system itself seemed designed to silence patients like her. In the quiet hours, she thought about the others mentioned in the envelope. Who were they? Were they still alive? Or had some of them suffered the consequences she had narrowly escaped? A pit of guilt settled in her stomach. If she hadn't been lucky. If Benjamin hadn't intervened. Days later, a knock at the hospital room door announced the arrival of someone unexpected. Agent Victor Kane, 42, a sharply dressed man with a stern, imposing presence, salt and pepper hair, and eyes that missed nothing. Benjamin rose immediately. "Mr. Clarke," Kane said without preamble, "we need to discuss the broader implications of your wife's case. It's bigger than any one hospital. We believe a network of negligence is affecting multiple facilities across the state." Marissa's pulse accelerated. She had seen enough medical failures to distrust those who wore badges, and yet Kane's presence carried authority that demanded attention. "Are you suggesting this was intentional?" Benjamin asked, voice low but sharp. "We're investigating," Kane said carefully, "but the repeated patterns, the timing, the selective reporting, it's enough to warrant a full federal review." Marissa realized the stakes had shifted dramatically. What started as her personal nightmare was morphing into a state-level investigation, with the potential to expose systemic malpractice. Administrator turned whistleblower. Her insight was invaluable. She knew the inner workings, the hidden memos, the subtle manipulations that kept negligence under wraps. Marissa listened intently as Dr. Porter outlined the risks, the potential exposure, and the labyrinthine structure of protection surrounding Harrow. Each revelation deepened the urgency. Patients' lives hung in the balance, and any delay could prove catastrophic. As they strategized, Marissa felt a mixture of fear and determination. The system had failed her and countless others. Now, armed with allies and evidence, she could confront not just Harrow but the network that enabled him. But every move carried risk. Someone could retaliate, silence them, or bury the truth forever. Over the next few days, Marissa and Benjamin coordinated secure meetings with other affected patients. Fiona Delgado, Jonathan Reyes, and Lila Chen arrived in hushed groups, each story adding depth and clarity to the emerging picture. Every case echoed her own experience. Trivialization, dismissal, the cruel shrug of authority. One evening, Benjamin pointed out a pattern on the whiteboard. Harrow's influence isn't just in his hospital. Look here, repeated appearances in advisory boards, medical review committees, and private consultations. He's woven into the system itself. Marissa's eyes widened. So even if we prove negligence, the system might protect him anyway. Benjamin's gaze hardened. Which is why we're not just collecting evidence. We're exposing the network, the enablers, the administrators who turned a blind eye. The first breakthrough came when Dr. Porter uncovered a series of internal memos indicating that certain complaints had been deliberately redirected or ignored. Language like patient non-compliant or symptoms subjective was repeatedly used to minimize responsibility. Harrow's patterns were deliberate, calculated, and disturbingly consistent. Marissa's pulse quickened. This wasn't incompetence. It was systemic concealment. And now they had the proof. One night, Marissa received an encrypted message. "Meet at the downtown cafe. Someone can help." Against Benjamin's cautious advice, she decided to go. The cafe was quiet, a stark contrast to the tension she felt. A woman with dark hair, professional attire, and sharp eyes approached. She introduced herself as Marcy Liu, a nurse who had worked under Harrow and witnessed repeated dismissals. Her account was chilling. Patients ignored, test results lost, complaints shrugged off. But her fear was palpable. She had witnessed threats subtle and overt whenever anyone questioned Harrow's methods. Marissa felt a surge of validation and urgency. Liu's testimony added another layer of depth to the case. A personal perspective from someone inside the system. Yet it also reinforced the danger. The closer they got, the more enemies they made. Over the next week, Marissa, Benjamin, and Kane compiled the most comprehensive dossier yet. Patient files, witness accounts, internal memos, and medical records were organized into a secure, encrypted network. Each piece reinforced the narrative. Harrow's negligence was not isolated, it was systematic, and it endangered lives. But just as momentum built, Marissa noticed subtle changes in hospital behavior. Emails went unanswered, security protocols tightened, and minor personnel shifts hinted at awareness of their investigation. Harrow was adapting, and the stakes were escalating. One evening, Marissa received a call from Dr. Masters. Her voice trembled slightly, unusual for her composed demeanor. "Marissa, there's a complication. A patient under Harrow's care has suffered severe consequences. They're stable, but it's a wake-up call. He's aware we're digging. Be cautious." Marissa's chest tightened. The abstract danger had crystallized into a real, immediate threat. They were no longer operating in theory. Lives were at risk, and retaliation was possible. Benjamin placed a reassuring hand over hers. "We proceed carefully, but we don't stop. Not now." The following day, Kane coordinated a discreet meeting with state regulators. Marissa presented the dossier, carefully outlining the patterns and evidence. She spoke with precision, emotion tempered by clarity. The regulators listened, faces pale, some scribbling notes, others exchanging worried glances. By the time the meeting ended, Marissa felt a small sense of triumph. A formal investigation was imminent. Harrow's network could no longer operate in total secrecy. But the relief was tempered by fear. Harrow had influence, and he would not go quietly. Weeks passed, and pressure mounted. Harrow's behavior shifted subtly. Hesitant consultations, terse emails, avoidance of scrutiny. It was clear he sensed exposure. Yet Marissa and her team were relentless, moving carefully, documenting every interaction, every misstep. One night, after reviewing files, Marissa received a sudden knock at the apartment door. Benjamin answered to find a man in a tailored suit, badge gleaming, eyes sharp and deliberate. "Mr. Clarke?" the man asked. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Yes." The man handed an envelope, then turned without another word. Benjamin tore it open. Marissa read the first line. "We've secured additional files confirming negligence across multiple states. The network is deeper than anticipated." Her pulse surged. They were uncovering not just one negligent doctor but a web of systemic failures that crossed hospital lines and state borders. The enormity of the case was staggering, but so was its potential impact. Lives could be saved, systems reformed, and accountability enforced. That night, Marissa lay in bed, heart racing, mind spinning. The fight was far from over. But for the first time, she felt the power of her actions, the courage that came from surviving, witnessing, and now confronting a dangerous network of negligence. Benjamin held her hand. His presence a constant anchor. "We're doing the right thing. This is bigger than fear. This is about lives, truth, and change." Marissa nodded, determination blazing. She understood the magnitude of what lay ahead. Exposure would bring confrontation, threats, and resistance. But silence was no longer an option. Not for her, not for the patients who had been ignored, and not for the system she intended to hold accountable. As the city lights shimmered outside their window, Marissa realized something profound. Survival had been the first step. Witnessing, documenting, and acting was the next. And only by confronting the full network of negligence could true change occur. If exposing a dangerous network puts your life at risk, would you risk everything to protect others who can't defend themselves? Now is the best time to subscribe to White Coat Secrets channel. Could one voice really ignite a change strong enough to topple a system built on silence? Marissa Clarke awoke to the quiet hum of the city, the early light spilling through the blinds of her apartment. Today felt different. The dossier she and Benjamin had compiled for months, the lives documented, the evidence secured, was now in the hands of state regulators and investigative journalists. The storm they had prepared for was approaching. Benjamin handed her a cup of coffee, his eyes steady but alive with tension. "Today we see how deep this goes. Are you ready?" Marissa nodded. Her body had healed enough to endure long hours, but it was her mind and spirit that carried the weight of responsibility. She wasn't just confronting Dr. Harrow anymore. She was challenging a culture of negligence. and others began to feel more like a conspiracy than negligence. In the following days, Marissa underwent additional tests, each one more precise and invasive than the last. The treatments, already taxing her body, now competed with the mental strain of knowing her case was part of a growing investigation. She felt exhaustion creeping into her bones, but Benjamin's presence, Kane's quiet guidance, and Dr. Masters' unwavering support created a fragile lifeline. One afternoon, while reviewing patient files with Benjamin, Marissa noticed something chilling. A recurring name among several of the misdiagnosed cases. Dr. Philip Harrow. The same surgeon who had told her to Google her symptoms. Benjamin's eyes darkened. So it wasn't just incompetence. He's at the center of this. Marissa's blood ran cold. She had confronted him, dismissed his arrogance, and now she understood the magnitude of his influence. It wasn't isolated. He had escaped scrutiny before, and her near death had been just another incident in a pattern no one wanted to acknowledge. Determined, Marissa insisted on seeing the documentation of Harrow's previous cases. Kane arranged it under strict supervision. As Marissa sifted through the files, a horrifying pattern emerged. Patients reporting similar symptoms, dismissed or misdiagnosed, sent home without critical follow-up. A handful had died, others permanently disabled. The handwriting on one note even mirrored the flippancy he had shown her. Patient may benefit from self-research. Monitor if severe. Her hands shook. The casual cruelty, the negligence bordering on malevolence, it was all there. And yet, it had gone unchecked for years. Benjamin leaned close, voice calm but deadly. We need to build a timeline. Every patient, every dismissal, every administrative decision that let him continue. The scope of the work was staggering. Marissa's mind reeled, but a spark of resolve ignited. She could no longer see herself as a passive survivor. She had to be a witness, a chronicler, and an advocate for the voiceless. One evening, exhausted and drained, Marissa received a message from an unknown number. We know what you're doing. Stop digging or there will be consequences. Her stomach twisted. Threats now? It had escalated from personal health to systemic corruption and intimidation. The walls seemed to close in, and she realized how dangerous truth could be. Benjamin immediately called Kane, who responded swiftly, coordinating increased security for Marissa and ensuring her medical team was aware of the potential risks. It was clear they were up against not just negligence, but people willing to protect themselves at any cost. Yet Marissa felt a strange clarity amidst the fear. Survival had taught her the fragility of life, and now courage became her currency. She had faced dismissal, pain, and near death. And now she would face intimidation. But she would not back down. The hospital corridors felt like both sanctuary and battlefield. Each interaction, every new test, every whispered consultation with Kane or Dr. Masters was a step into unknown territory. A delicate balance between healing her body and unraveling a web of deceit. One afternoon, as Marissa's floor was being adjusted, a nurse whispered urgently to her, "You're not the first to notice, but you might be the first willing to fight." Marissa looked at Benjamin, who offered a small, resolute nod. She understood then. This journey was bigger than illness. It was about accountability, advocacy, and the courage to confront a system built to protect itself over the patients it served. Night fell, city lights glinting through the hospital windows. Marissa stared at the ceiling, exhausted but awake, heart racing with determination. She knew the fight ahead would test every fiber of her being. But with Benjamin, Kane, and Dr. Masters by her side, she realized that survival was not enough. She had to act. A sudden alert on Benjamin's phone made them both tense. A new report had come in. Another patient with similar symptoms had been misdiagnosed, discharged, and returned in critical condition. The chain was continuing, and the consequences were immediate. Marissa gripped Benjamin's hand tightly. "We can't stop now. Every second counts." He nodded, eyes scanning the message. "We won't. Not until every life at risk is accounted for." As the night deepened, a chilling thought settled in her mind. How many more Marissas were out there, ignored, dismissed, waiting for someone to notice? And how far would the system go to keep them silent? The stakes had never been higher, the risks never clearer, and the path ahead filled with peril. But Marissa understood something crucial. She was no longer just a patient. She was a witness, a fighter, and a voice for those who could not speak. If the system is failing patients repeatedly, how far would you go to expose the truth and protect the vulnerable? Subscribe to White Coat Secrets and follow Marissa as she dives deeper into a shocking medical cover-up that could affect countless lives. Why had she survived while so many others hadn't? Marissa Clarke sat in the dimly lit office Kane had arranged for her and Benjamin. The blinds were drawn, but the streetlights outside cast long streaks across the floor, giving the room a tense, almost conspiratorial air. Files were spread across the table, laptops glowing, and a whiteboard filled with scribbled names and dates dominated one wall. Benjamin leaned over, tracing a series of patient visits. "Look here," he said, pointing to a list of cases spanning nearly 5 years. "Dr. Harrow isn't just negligent, he's consistent. He keeps resurfacing across multiple hospitals, multiple departments. And in every instance, administrative oversight failed to intervene." Marissa swallowed hard. Her pulse quickened. "So it wasn't just me. There's a pattern." "Yes," Kane added, standing behind them, arms crossed. "And the concerning part is the network around him. Nurses, junior doctors, administrative staff, they've all, consciously or not, reinforced his negligence. Files get shuffled. Complaints disappear. It's a web." Marissa leaned back, her chest tightening. The feeling of betrayal she had carried from the first dismissal by Harrow now expanded, engulfing the knowledge that countless others had been failed. She pictured faceless patients, women, men, children, all slipping through a system supposedly designed to protect them. Benjamin's hand brushed hers, grounding her. "We can't fix the system, Marissa. But we can start unraveling the network. Piece by piece." The first step was identifying those who had suffered similar fates. Kane provided them with a secure portal, a database of anonymized cases with the same hallmarks. Delayed diagnosis, unnecessary hospitalizations, complications from untreated conditions. Marissa pored over the files, each story striking her like a blow. One case in particular caught her eye. A young teacher named Fiona Delgado, 29, admitted what doctors said was stress-related abdominal pain. Her charts mirrored Marissa's in unnerving detail. Tests dismissed, symptoms trivialized, the casual indifference of Dr. Harrow noted in her file. Fiona had been discharged once too early, returning with severe complications. Marissa felt a surge of empathy and determination. Fiona could have been her. The thought ignited something she hadn't felt since her first treatment session. Righteous anger. This wasn't just about her survival. This was about every patient whose voice had been silenced. Benjamin spoke softly. Marissa nodded. She understood the danger but refused to allow fear to paralyze her. She had survived Harrow's negligence once. She would not let others fall victim silently. The next day, Kane arranged a secure video call with Fiona Delgado. Marissa's heart thumped as Fiona appeared on the screen, a petite woman with worried eyes, her brown hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. You're Marissa Clarke?" Fiona asked hesitantly. "Yes," Marissa replied, voice steady. "I survived what you're describing. And I'm here to make sure no one else has to go through it alone." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "I thought I was imagining it. Everyone told me I was overreacting. Her voice broke. "You weren't," Marissa assured her. "We have to make sure the truth comes out. Together." Over the following weeks, Marissa, Benjamin, and Kane worked tirelessly. They compiled evidence, connecting the dots between Harrow's cases, administrative oversights, and subtle patterns of concealment. Each piece of information revealed another layer of complexity and deliberate inaction. One evening, while reviewing hospital emails, Marissa stumbled upon a shocking memo. It was addressed to a senior administrator, detailing a string of complaints about Dr. Harrow over several years. The response was cold, bureaucratic, almost indifferent. "No action required at this time. Patient outcomes are within expected ranges." Marissa's hands shook. Not only had Harrow's negligence gone unchecked, but the system had actively ignored warning signs, rationalizing failures with administrative language. She could feel a storm of anger rising inside her, a combination of fear, frustration, and a deep-seated desire for justice. Benjamin watched her, eyes steady. "We need this public. Carefully but publicly. People need to know what's happening." Marissa nodded, though anxiety gnawed at her. Exposing a network of negligence wasn't simple. Harrow had connections, influence, and reputation. They were walking a tightrope. One misstep, and the truth could be buried again. The first tangible step came in the form of a secure meeting with a small group of affected patients and families. Kane coordinated it in a neutral location. Marissa entered, heart racing, and was greeted by Fiona Delgado, and two other patients she had only read about in files. Jonathan Reyes, 52, a school janitor whose heart condition was exacerbated by repeated misdiagnoses, and Lila Chen, 34, a lab technician whose autoimmune disorder had gone unnoticed for months. Each story was devastating, yet familiar. Every detail mirrored the dismissal, the trivialization, the subtle cruelty Marissa had endured. The common thread was clear. Dr. Harrow's negligence had affected lives far beyond what anyone had imagined. Marissa addressed the group. "We're here to share our experiences, document everything, and make sure no one else is silenced. If we act together, we can create a record so powerful that it can't be ignored." Fiona's voice trembled. "I've been scared to speak out. I thought no one would listen." "People are listening now," Marissa said firmly. "We will make them listen. And we will protect each other while we do it." As they spoke, the atmosphere was a mixture of fear, determination, and hope. They began recording testimonies, compiling medical records, and creating a secure database for all evidence. Each story added weight to the growing case against Harrow and the administrative failures that allowed him to persist. But danger was never far. One morning, Marissa received an anonymous email: "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Benjamin immediately contacted Kane, who increased security protocols. Cameras were checked, laptops encrypted, and personal routines adjusted to minimize risk. The threat was real, and yet, Marissa refused to be intimidated. Her determination led her to a bold step: contacting a reputable investigative journalist with experience in exposing medical malpractice. Marissa drafted the email carefully, summarizing her story, the corroborated cases, and the evidence collected. Within hours, the journalist responded: "This is serious. If what you're presenting is accurate, it's explosive. Let's meet securely." For the first time, Marissa felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. Exposure was imminent. The truth was about to leave the shadows. Meanwhile, Dr. Harrow remained unaware of the growing storm. He continued his rounds, casual and confident, unaware that Marissa and the network of patients, investigators, and journalists were closing in. But the first ripple of exposure had begun, and even a small disturbance in his meticulously maintained facade threatened to cascade into chaos. One night, Marissa sat at her kitchen table, files spread before her, her laptop glowing, Benjamin nearby. "We're close," she whispered, almost to herself. So close to stopping him from harming anyone else. Benjamin's hand found hers. "Stay strong. We're in this together." Marissa nodded, her resolve hardening. She understood that survival alone was no longer enough. The lives of others, the accountability of the system, and the integrity of medicine itself depended on their persistence. And then came the unexpected twist. An email from Dr. Masters, marked urgent. Marissa opened it, her eyes scanning rapidly. It revealed an internal memo. Administrators had begun to notice the anomaly in patient complaints and were quietly covering tracks, shifting files, and sending misleading communications to avoid investigation. Marissa's stomach twisted. The danger was deeper than she imagined. Exposure wouldn't just be challenging. It could be met with resistance, deception, and retaliation from those invested in protecting Harrow and themselves. Yet the risk only strengthened her resolve. The first tangible step toward justice had been taken, but the path ahead promised confrontation, secrets, and shocking revelations. As the night deepened, Marissa stared out the window at the city lights, knowing this was only the beginning. The network of negligence was vast, and unraveling it would require every ounce of courage she could summon. Somewhere, Dr. Harrow slept unaware, while Marissa prepared to illuminate the darkness. What would you do if uncovering the truth meant risking everything? Your safety, your reputation, and the wrath of those in power. Hit the subscribe button now. How far would someone go to protect a secret that could destroy their career, their reputation, and their life? Marissa Clarke woke to a storm of emails. Each notification carried a weight, a sense of urgency that made her stomach tighten. She sat at the edge of her hospital bed, scanning the messages with growing unease. Administrators had begun to notice anomalies. Internal communications hinted at curiosity, suspicion, and a creeping awareness that someone was asking too many questions. Benjamin, ever vigilant, appeared beside her with a cup of coffee. "They're getting nervous," he said quietly. "Harrow has influence, but even he can't completely hide the cracks." Marissa nodded, feeling the tension coil tighter in her chest. This was no longer just about survival or even exposing one negligent doctor. The stakes had expanded into a systemic battle. Every patient record, every whispered conversation, every overlooked complaint was part of a larger, fragile network that she now aimed to dismantle. Dr. Kane arrived later that morning, bringing news that both exhilarated and alarmed her. "We have an ally," he said, handing over a secure phone. The voice on the line belonged to Dr. Lillian Porter, 48, a former hospital.